Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another book versus episode video. And today we're going to be discussing the Haunted Mask 2 book versus the Haunted Mask 2 episode. Now, these two versions of the story are vastly different. In case you have never either have read the book or have watched the episode, they're going to be very different experiences either way you go. So there's going to be a lot to compare here. So I just want to preface that before we get into it. I did give the book a 4.7 out of 5. I do understand that this is a very divisive Goosebumps book. And I know that there are people in the camp that do not like this book all that much. And I completely respect and love every one of you that do not like this book. But I'm in the camp that really enjoys it and, in fact, loves it in a lot of ways. I just think it's definitely one of the more visceral and disturbing Goosebumps books ever made. In the episode, I gave a perfect 5 out of 5, and I said this in my review. I think this is the best episode in the whole show. I just think the body horror, the plot progression, for it being a sequel, mind you, is just great. The acting is really good. The atmosphere rocks. The direction and the soundtrack is just really good. There's a lot of memorable things to take away from this episode. There's some comedy. There's some genuinely scary moments. Some of the more tense-filled scenes in all of Goosebumps television. This is amazing. And it might sound like a runaway. You might can already guess that I'm going to prefer one over the other, but it's not really like that, I would say. They're very close in some regards for me in my respect and admiration for it, and I'm going to kind of get into that, kind of going over the characters, the atmosphere, the tone of the story, the, plot progression, the climax, the ending. I'm going to be covering all of that. So let's start off with the characters. Now, sometimes I like to start off a little offbeat. So I'm going to start off offbeat a little bit. We're going to start off with Carly Beth's mask. Now, you might be asking, why am I starting off there? It's because it's pretty easy to start off there. Carly Beth's mask is nowhere to be seen in the book. As in the episode, it's one of the main characters. So off the bat, I'm going to give the edge to Carly Beth's mask to the episode. I think having Carly Beth's mask return in a sequel like this, whether you want to call this a Haunted Mask Part 2, because that's really what it feels like more so than a sequel to Haunted Mask like the book did. But I think this is the best way possible to bring back Carly Beth's mask. Adding all the elements throughout the story for Carly Beth's mask, I think it's just the best, the best story ever to bring back her mask. And I think, it's very memorable in that regard because of the role the mask played, so I want to give it to the episode. This kind of stems with that we're going to get into the shop owner. Remember the iconic shop owner from the first episode in the book who gave Carly Beth her mask, or in the book, the Haunted Mask, it was given to her. In the episode, she kind of stole it. I think I'm going to give the edge here to the episode as well. In the book, the shop owner had closed shop for good. And when Steve broke into the basement of the shop to try to see if there's any masks left over, there was a really weird scene about him trying to make a deal with the shop owner. As in the episode, this is not a spoiler, by the way, very early on, the shop owner gets taken over by the mask, and he's kind of there to facilitate the new Carly Beth's mask plotline. But I definitely think that the shop owner was given a little more of the eerie treatment in the episode, so the edge goes to the episode for the shop owner. Now let's get into some side characters. This one's pretty easy to talk about. Chuck, Steve's best friend in, the Haunted Mask stories, book or episode. I think Chuck was given the best service ever of all time in this episode. The iconic Mafia Don costume, the comedy, some of the very quotable lines. It's just so memorable with this episode. As in Haunted Mask 2, the book, he's still just the side character. And as a matter of fact, he's actually pretty absent throughout the book, I would say. So not much of Chuck there. It's maybe more towards the ending. There's a kind of an exciting thing to think about with Chuck. But as in the episode, I just love Chuck in this, so I'm going to give the edge to Chuck in the episode. Sabrina, Carly's best friend. I'm going to give the edge to neither. I think they're pretty much deadlocked. Sabrina, unfortunately, is given the side character treatment in both versions of this story. The episode, she just feels a little more developed in the book, but her role is still the same in the book. She's just there, and matter of fact, all the scenes that she's in the book, she's in the same exact ones in the episode. Really, nothing changes for her. So I'm gonna give it a deadlock here. She's pretty much the same. Now let's get into Steve, the main character, arguably, for the book. As in the episode, I don't think really Steve is really the main character at all, but let's just keep it the same for comparison reasons. Honestly, Steve has a different plot progression in the book compared to the episode. In the book, Steve has to deal with getting punished by coaching these younger kids in the soccer team, and there's this whole element of revenge, and there's actually more experiences that Steve goes through personally in the story, in the book, I would say, over the episode. As in the book, he acquires the mask before the day of Halloween, and he gets stuck in his mask the night before, and he has to go throughout the whole day of Halloween being stuck in his mask, and all of his plans he had planned get kind of foiled, which is pretty interesting to read about. Also, how Steve has to get the mask off is very intriguing. As in the episode, Steve is more relatable and compatible to Carly Beth, and Carly Beth's experiences that she had to go through with her mask are kind of put onto Steve. And some of the stuff in the episode that Steve goes through is kind of elevated, in my opinion, because of how the body horror was shot and how those plot changes that happen in the story elevated his character in the process, and it gave Steve more of a fitting story than the book did. So I'm going to give the edge to Steve to the episode. I think it was very exceptional. I do prefer episode Steve over the book, in my opinion. Let's get with Steve's mask, the old man mask. Off the bat, I want to say in the book, this cover is extremely misleading because Steve does not trick or treat with the old man mask in the book. However, in the episode, he does. And I think the old man mask is just a creepier concept to a mask than Carly Beth's mask, because in either way you go, Steve's mask is taking over Steve slowly but surely, changing how he, operates his body. And it's just a different element that gets highlighted in these versions of either way you go here that the first book and episode didn't really do, and that was capitalizing on the body horror of it all. So the old man mask, even though there are some really good scenes in the book, I definitely have to give the edge to the episode just for how it looked and how it was creepy and how those effects elevated the mask. I just have to give the edge here to the episode for Steve's mask on that regard. Just very well done. If you have seen this episode and you've seen that mask, you know how terrifying that mask is. It's creepy. Now let's get into Carly Beth. Carly Beth's character is more of a side character in the book. Even though I do like her role in the book, she still has that, I've conquered my fears mentality, which I think this is my favorite version of Carly Beth ever, is the, brave Carly Beth that's not afraid to stand up and go against, the stereotypes that people try to label her in the first book and episode. As in the episode, it's kind of the same way, except Carly Beth is given more of a starring role. I arguably think that Carly Beth is the main character in this episode, comparing her to Steve here. And part of it, I think these changes were made for Catherine Long, the actress who plays Carly Beth in these episodes, because just of how much she steals the show. And I think this was a great move on the show's part to make Carly Beth arguably the main character and kind of give her the front and center of how she's changed and developed. So I'm going to give Carly Beth the edge to the episode. Now let's get into atmosphere and tone here. I want to bring up tone because I think it's, since they're so different, I want to talk about which tone I prefer. So let's start off with tone, I guess. The episode is more of a direct continuation of the first story, the very first episode in the Goosebumps television show, The Haunted Mask. And it's kind of keeping that same tone, those same characters, except it does have its more eerie moments and it's more concentrated on the body or horror element. And it's kind of given a higher stakes than the first episode, which I really enjoy. However, in the book, I think the tone is more visceral and it's more thought-inducing and it's more disturbing in the process for what Steve has to go through, in my opinion. So for tone, I'm going to give it to the book. I really dig the tone of the book. It has its comedic moments here and there, which are outright hilarious, and some of the comedy honestly doesn't stick as well. But other than that, the visceral moments really do carry the book. So I'm gonna have to give it to the book. Now, atmosphere is quite the opposite. I think the edge obviously goes to the episode. The episode put the atmosphere on the forefront of it all. When I think of Halloween and Goosebumps, this is the first thing I think of every single time, and there's a reason behind it. It's just because they put so much effort into making that important in the episode, as in the book. It just gets put on the back burner, I think it was more concentrated on Steve's situation and Steve getting the mask and making this plan than it was actually trying to set up atmosphere. So in that regard, I'm hands down giving it to the episode. Very well done. William Fruit did a phenomenal job on following up Timothy Bond's work in the first Haunted Mask installment and keeping that atmosphere, which I think was a great choice to go with. Now we're getting into plot, where these books are vastly different. The book, Steve gets punished by having to, basically coach a kid's soccer team, and these kids prank him and almost break his foot. These kids get on his nerves to the point where he feels like he has to get revenge on him, and he has to go steal a mask, and he gets confronted by the shop owner, who tries to, call his mom, and he has to run away, and he's just stole a random mask, and the mask he decided to steal in the dark was the old man mask. He really didn't choose it. There's a bunch of differences setting up that, and then of course, what's the whole story of how it sets up the night before Halloween, in the day of Halloween, Steve's trapped in his mask, and of course, everybody knows, if you have read the book, how different the book is in the ending to the episode, and how Steve has to get off the mask, and that whole part of the story just does not happen in the episode. The episode brings back Carly Beth's mask. It's come back from the power of Halloween. It's taken over the shop owner. Steve still kind of similarly finds the mask, but due to the help of Carly Beth's mask, because Carly Beth's mask is looking for a minion to control to help destroy Carly Beth's symbol of love. And Steve's motives have changed from getting revenge on soccer kids to now wanting to scare people before he gets too old for Halloween. And this accompanies a whole big plethora of changes. There's new scenes added that the book just doesn't have. Of course, leading up to Act 2, where Carly Beth is kind of like teaming up with Chuck and Sabrina, and it's bringing Chuck more into the mix of things than the book did. So for plot, comparing them are very different. But if I had a preference, I think I would prefer the episode over the book, because those changes the plot had overall elevated characters, and it gave better motives, especially for Steve. And it kind of gave Chuck the limelight a little bit better. I think it's definitely the best story to ever bring back the true green Haunted Mask that we all know. I think this is the best story to ever bring it back. And I'm going to say that with a hard confidence here. This is just the best follow-up possible for Carly Beth's mask. So for plot, I'm giving it to the episode. Now, the climax is a little bit different. This one might surprise people, but the climax is obviously how Steve has to come to get the mask off. Which one do I prefer? When Steve has to go through everything he does in the book, I think it honestly makes that climax a lot more jarring. And some people might think it's a stupid climax, and that goes to the camp of people that do not like this book. That's completely fair to think that, but I'm in the camp where I was able to put myself in Steve's shoes, and I was genuinely disturbed by it. As in the episode, it felt more like it was just predictable in some ways, but it's not really anything to deduct points on, or have anything negative to say about it. It just, like, you expected the stuff with Steve to happen in the climax. So I'm gonna give the edge to the book here for the climax. I like that the book tried to do something different with how Steve got the mask off. I like that it tried to separate itself from the first book. And honestly, I'm a big fan of doing something different in Haunted Mask sequels. You don't need a symbol of love every time. I like the idea of having masks with different concepts of how they work and how they take over people and how to get them off. I like that concept when it makes sense. Now, part of the negatives into the story is that it doesn't make it make sense at all. But it does work in the sense that it's shocking when you first read it. And even rereading it, it's still fun to reread it as well. So I'm gonna give the climax to the book. Now the overall ending is also very different because two different plots, obviously. The ending to the episode features a very memorable ending where, all the kids, get the situation absolved, and they go back to Steve's house, and they have to decide what to do with the masks. That might be a mild spoiler, but for the sake of comparison, I got to bring it up. And of course, the ending, everybody remembers it, dealing with particularly one of the masks, which kind of gives more sequel bait opportunity for the episode than I think even the book does. The book's ending is, it could happen. It could happen. It's just more of a monkey wrench situation thrown at the end for the sake of a twist, which explains a lot for a specific character in the story. I'm not going to say what that reason is, because then you'll definitely know who I'm referring to. But it can definitely happen. And honestly, I would like to see a follow-up for the book because of the ending. However, I do prefer the ending to the episode because I think Steve came full circle with this ending a little bit better than he did in the book, and it's much more believable in that regard. So, comparing the two, which one do I prefer and which one would I recommend over the other? If I had to recommend one or the other, obviously I'm going to recommend the episode over the book. I think this is a superior version to the Haunted Mask 2 story. Now, that's not taking anything away from the book. I do love the book tremendously. I do think there's a lot of stuff to enjoy with the story. And Goosebumps is a book franchise. Read the book, then watch the episode. This is one of those situations where if you watch them both and compare them, there might be some things that you might enjoy from both or over the other because they're so different. So this is one of those situations you definitely got to try them both. See which one you prefer more. Which leads me to the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I want to know down in the comments section, when it comes to Haunted Mask 2, which one do you love more than the other? Do you love the book more, or do you love the episode more? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.